Good afternoon, Outlands. Today, my guest is Duchess Cecilia. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. I'm glad to see you. It's so fun to see everybody's faces, even though we can't all be together. So it's a little bit of joy. So thank you so much for being here today. I know Albron has a busy day, so I'm glad you're able to log on with me.
It worked out perfectly, timing-wise.
Cool. So let's go ahead and just jump right in. So Duchess Cecilia, you are a two-time queen, obviously. You're a Laurel.
Yep.
What do you specialize in?
I think when I was elevated, my specialties were 14th century clothing and etc., and then also calligraphy and illumination. I don't particularly do 14th century anymore, although I would not say that I'm a specialist in Viking Age Norwegian clothing either, but that's what I'm working on at the moment. I still do a fair amount of calligraphy and illumination. I also am a musician. I've recently learned a new instrument that I'm very excited about, my little lyre.
Very cool.
But I'm a dabbler. So I weave and I make banners and I cook and I do stuff.
So were you a Laurel before you were queen the first time?
Yeah, I think I'd been a Laurel for maybe 2 or 3 years before Walbert won the first time. So
cool. Awesome. So your first reign was in Aidenvelt and your second reign was in the Outlands.
Correct.
So what would you say the biggest difference in reigns were from your first to your second?
I mean, a lot of the differences was logistical to do with us and our lives. I had one child. My oldest daughter had turned 1 just before our first reign. And we were living in the same place as all of her grandparents. My parents would take her when it was convenient. My in-laws play quite actively. They're both peers still in Aidenvelt. And so we only had one and we had a ton of help with her.
Yeah.
And then with our second reign, I had 2 and they were not of a great age to manage themselves. And we had no family. So that was a huge difference in terms of how we had to manage the reign. Our first reign, I had some health issues that I didn't have the second reign. So that was excellent. The second reign, Walric worked a lot more than he did our first reign. So there was certainly we were a lot different. But I think, I suspect you mean more the cultural differences.
Well, no, I mean, those are all great things to talk about, right? Because I feel like as a mother, a lot of times people don't realize the gift that they have when they have relatives locally. And then when they move or their relatives move, it's such a huge eye opener. I'll never forget, I had a friend that was like, oh, we're thinking about moving our whole family to Arizona for my husband to launch this thing and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I'm just going to put it out there. You don't know how lucky you are having your parents here to help you. And she had twins. So I was like, you don't know. And I've never lived near my parents. So they would fly in and rescue me for, a week or so at a time. But I think that is a huge consideration, and knowing like the age of your children and knowing if they can self-manage. And those are all like humongous factors in, the level of stress that you're going to experience on the reign. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up. But yes, I did kind of mean more culturally.
I mean, truthfully, I haven't lived in Aidenvelt for a long time. Let me just specify that. It was 10 years because it was we moved just before my youngest was born. So I always know how old or how long I've lived here because of her. And I have a horrifying memory. So in my recollection, culturally, I mean, I don't think it's that different. I think that here in the Outlands, we're a little more relaxed. We're a little bit less focused on everything being just so all the time. And, part of that isn't cultural. Part of that is just sort of how we experienced reigning. I think there's always going to be a big difference in how comfortable you are between a first and a second reign. And, we had 5 years or so between our reigns, and we were super anxious the first time about doing everything right. And the second reign, obviously, we wanted to do things right. And I think we had sort of an extra motivation because we wanted to make sure that we didn't seem like a foreign crown. It was a huge deal to us. And so we were still anxious about doing a good job. But I felt like here, like people wanted to help us achieve that, and people were really open and friendly and understanding when we maybe didn't quite get there. And it's not that people in Atenville were like looking for us to fail or anything, but we were at the end of like a long string of kind of the same group of people being crowned a lot, and so we were new, and you know, that was always going to be a little bit different, just because, you know, we weren't the same as what had been coming previous. And so I think the stress of that was more. I will admit that I have pretty vague memories of our first reign because I was hopped up on Oxy for most of it. It was legal, it was prescribed. So I have kind of big chunks of it where I only really remember the highlights, and that doesn't make for a great story.
Were you crowned at Estrella during your first reign?
Yeah, we were Estrella.
Were you Estrella crowned as an Outlands crown?
No, we were summer reign. So we did Estrella as crowned our first reign, and we did Battlemore as crowned the second reign, which I preferred. That was my goal. I didn't want to be Estrella queen coming from the Outlands, and partially it was because I don't know, I didn't want to mix those experiences up, I guess. You know, I wanted to kind of have my Estrella experience as queen be my Estrella experience as queen. But also, it's so much easier to manage a big event like that when you're in your home kingdom, because you have access to all the people that you would have access to. And I like loads of Outlanders go to Estrella, and I know that we would have had tons of support, and that wasn't my concern. My concern was just, I'm anxious anyway, and I didn't want to have to worry about the logistics of it. And so I was like, you know what? If it's Battlemore, I'm at home. I know what Battlemore looks like. I know what the expectations are going to be, and what kind of staffing I'm going to have, and et cetera. And, you know, Pennsic, we don't have to do anything.
Right? It's like the greatest.
So good. Lily's, nothing. No responsibilities at either of those two events.
Yeah.
And so I didn't have to worry about logistics, and I didn't have to worry about making sure that I had everything in place in advance. And so I was glad to. And also here, the winter reign is so much traveling north and south in dicey weather, and I didn't want to do that with the girls.
No.
So it was very important to me that we do a summer reign here for those varied reasons. Also, the person who was in charge of the girls for me is a teacher. And so she had a lot more availability to help them during the summer. For sure.
That's cool. So what is your favorite Outlands tradition?
Oh, my favorite Outlands tradition. I think it's the crown dirt.
Yes.
Like, I've watched your show and I haven't heard anyone mention that. And it's by far my favorite. And I wonder if it's just because people don't, like, it's not an obvious tradition. I think a lot of crowns kind of do it quietly or to the side. I love that tradition.
And I think, honestly, too, I think that sometimes people are like, oh, crown's going to start late. I don't have to be there right at 9. And so I think maybe a lot of people don't even, well, I hate to say it, but maybe people don't realize that that's such a huge part of crown tourney, and that it happens because it happens so early on. Like, oh, the procession is going to take forever. Oh, this is going to take forever. Like, I don't really need to be there until like the nitty, gritty of the fighting starts. But they missed that huge tradition. We talked about it in the show we did for the Lovecock people.
Mm-hmm.
They were like, what? Like,
well, yeah. Something that I had no correlation. Should I explain what that is? I don't know if everyone will know.
Yeah, explain it, because we do have out of kingdom viewers occasionally.
So, and forgive me, Gunvald, forgive me if I explain it wrong. He's the one who explained it to me initially. So there's a box of dirt, and it contains dirt from the first Outlands Crown Tournament. And then every Crown Tournament, you sprinkle a little of that dirt out on the tournament field, and then you get a little of the dirt from the new tournament field and mix it in. And I think, aren't there some ashes in there too?
Yeah.
Is it leaf? Am I wrong? Is it Duke leaf?
I'm
not super confident about that.
I'm not either. I know that there people have put ashes in there. I think there's ashes like from multiple people.
Yeah,
but I don't know the whole history about that. I just know that I'm fairly confident in saying that's like a completely unbroken tradition that has happened at every single crown tourney that we've had. So
that's what we were given to understand. And basically it's a continuity thing, right? So we're always having crown tournament on the same soil. I mean, it's a super cool tradition. I'm really into it. I love that one.
I do too.
mean, there's other ones that are great. I mean, the Baby Knights chain is fantastic. Walric is, every time it comes out, he's just like, ugh, because he's not an Outlands Knight.
Oh, yeah.
He wants to be in that chain. And I'm like, haha, you don't get to be.
Yeah, it's a weird thing coming as a peer from another kingdom and then like missing on some of the traditions that you live in. But it's still a very cool tradition. So.
It is. Yeah, we don't have one of those. We should start one for the Ladies of the Rose. That'd be awesome.
Yeah. We should. So yeah, I mean, the Ladies of the Rose are such an amazing group of people, and they really help incoming queens so much that, yeah, I mean, I think that there could be some really cool traditions that we could do. So there's one that I'm contemplating about starting possibly. Yeah. So what was your, I guess what I want to ask is, so who were your champions in the Outlands when you reigned?
It was Sir Michelangelo. It was my champion. And then my rapier champion was Don Robert.
Okay.
And my rapier of chivalry was Master Gianni.
Okay, cool.
And then Walric's champion was Earl Mortigan.
Okay. And then, so how would you describe your experience with the White Scarf community as queen in the Outlands?
I wish I had done a better job participating with the White Scarf community. And that is, I would say that's probably my biggest regret as queen in this kingdom. I think I did a better job of that in Eight and Belt. And I think here, I was just distracted by other things. And I don't think that I participated as much with the White Scarves as I should have. And I'm sorry for that. And the few White Scarves I've talked to about it have been super gracious about it. And which I appreciate. But I mean, the sad truth is I don't like fighting.
Yeah.
You know, and
perfectly
Walric,
okay.
Yeah, Walric participated with the heavy community and I didn't have to. I remember when we were in Eight and Belt, there'd been 3 or 4 queens in a row who fought, and some of them fought for real, like Her Grace Elzbieta, who's now a Master of Defense. She fought for really real. But then there had been a handful of queens who had just gotten in armor and had stood on the field. And I remember I won, and instantly, some members of the White Scarf came and said, all right, well, let's get you set up to fight. And I was like, I don't want to do that. And they were like, what now? And I felt really bad. I really did, but I'm not an athletic person at all.
No. And you should never feel bad. So Countess Martine was asking, like, what should I do? And I said, do you have an interest in this? And she said, not at all. And I said, then don't do it. Like, put your support where your love is. Like, it's not that they're not supported by you. It's that you can support them in other ways by being present. And that's perfectly fine. But don't be who you're not, just for the sake of...
I think I did a better job of that in Eight and Belt than I did here. And partially that was the girls. Sophia was like 3 or something. Like, it was difficult to, when she was in an event, it was difficult to be really focused on things. And, it was one thing to have someone watch your kids when you're doing court, but it's a little bit more difficult when she really wants mommy. Yeah. And it's the middle of sordid affair and you're like, mommy's trying to do something. You're just sitting in a chair. You're not busy. Read me a book.
So when you were a queen in Eight and Belt, had the mod been created yet? The Masters of Defense? And had they been...
No, it wasn't even a thing in Eight and Belt. Here, it was the reign after us. So it was Roger and Ingra. So it was in discussions when we were crowned. And I remember having a circle where, we sort of talked about that. And I was like, hey, this is coming. I'm not going to have anything to do with it. This is going to be after us. You should probably start thinking about it. Like, this is going to happen. But we had nothing to do with that at all. So. Okay,
cool. What is your favorite memory of being queen? That's from Lady Alora.
Hi, Laura. Oh gosh, that's super hard. Because we had a great reign here. It was so much fun and so many awesome things happened. probably the thing that sticks out is because I was just talking to you about it before, and it was at Pennsic when I got to sing with the lute player. That's not a real Outlandsy memory, but it was super cool. We had gone to Pennsic. It was my very first time at Pennsic, and we had gone. They do a sort of pre-show, I guess, for RoyalTea at Casa Barducci, which is the big Italian villa on the lake. May its name be a blessing, since it's gone now. That was a strange way to phrase that, but it's a really cool place, and I am going to miss it in my heart, having only been there once. But anyway, the way it's structured, there was like a balcony that you could get up to and look over the lake. And Walrick and I were standing there looking at the view, and it was super cool. And you're surrounded in this amazing environment. And a lute player started to play down on the bottom. And I was like, well, that's amazing, because I love the lute. I mean, who plays the lute? Like, no one plays the lute. My father used to play the lute. That's why I like it so much. And I said, wouldn't it be cool if he started playing some 16th century art ballad that I happen to know? Because I studied early music, and I have a fairly big repertoire of that like lute era music. In part because my father played the lute, and my voice teacher was like, oh, we're going to get him to play at a recital. Didn't happen. But, and Walrick was like, honestly, that would be the coolest thing that ever happened. And I was like, really? Okay. So I went huddled downstairs, and I went up to the lute player, and he was like, what are you doing talking to me? I'm just ambiance. And I was like, do you take requests? And he said, I don't know what you're talking about. This is really uncomfortable for me. And I said, do you know any John Dowland? Because I do, and it would be fun. No one's here yet. Like, just mess around. And we managed to find two pieces that we both knew enough of to make it through. And we just sang at sunset on the lake with an Italian bloody villa in the background.
Yeah.
And Walrick is just like, it's cool, because he's not a real like sentimental person, really. And so it was really neat to be able to have an experience that was really meaningful to me, that was also meaningful for him.
Yeah.
That was a cool experience. Pennsic was super fun. I really love Pennsic.
I love Pennsic. Love Pennsic.
And hanging out with Alora. That's my other favorite memory.
Awesome.
Actually, that's true. Alora was a fantastic attendant. She was with me a lot.
Very cool. She sent you a heart. Yeah, a heart.
Get it right. There we go.
So what is your favorite award to give in the Outlands as queen?
So I think the easy answer is an AOA. That's what we all say. And it's because it's true. Absolutely the AOA. That award's amazing. But I want to be different, and everyone's already said that. So I'm going to say that my favorite award to give is the Queen's Grace.
Okay.
And that award exists in Eight Belts as well. And I really love that award, because I feel like every other award that we have is to recognize what you do, right? What you're actually like physically contributing to the group. And that's why we're awarding you for it, is because you're doing something that's making the group better. And that's really important. But the Queen's Grace is more intangible, right? It's for who you are. And so, there are those people in the SCA where you don't admire them because they've made something, or they've won something, or they've arranged for something to happen. You admire them because they're just cool. They just inspire you for whatever reason. And the Walker of the Way is like that as well. But I think coming from Eytenvelt, I had a little bit of holdover from that, in that, in the sort of the corollary to the Walker in Eytenvelt is only given by the king. It's not given by the queen. And it's not like that with the Walker, but that's kind of how I still felt about it. And so our Walker was Walrick. And it's not like I disagreed with him. We gave it to Don Esteban, who's fantastic. But I didn't necessarily participate a great deal in that. And I felt like the Queen's Graces were from me. Like, they were for things that I wanted to, or to people that I really wanted to highlight for their coolness. It's hard to describe. Like, it's intangible.
Yeah.
And what's funny is that I guess traditionally, queens only give one.
Yeah.
but that's not in the charter.
Yep. How many did you give, and who did you give them to?
3. And oh my gosh, who did I give them to? I gave one to Anne by God. Mm-hmm. And I gave one to, well, this is horrible. I don't remember. I have the worst memory on earth. Guys,
well, because I'm totally putting you on the spot.
Well, I would have looked this. I knew you were going to ask this question. I meant to look it up, and then I got busy getting ready for my class.
No worries.
Oh, who else did I give it to? Because I always mix it up with the Legion of Gallantry, right? Which was created because, and forgive me if I get the story wrong, Madigan told me this, that she created Legion of Gallantry because she thought she could only give one Queen's Grace, and she wanted to give more. And then she realized later that that wasn't necessarily true. And so the charters for those 2 awards they're like identical. And I was really confused about that. When I was I was reading these charters, and I'm like, well, which one am I supposed to give for what? And so then I asked Madigan, and she's like, it's fine. Do whatever you want. Like, I don't want rules for this. I know I gave a Legion of Gallantry to Mistress Melodia. I gave a Legion of Gallantry to Sir Ronan. Who did I give my other Queen's Graces to? This is mortifying. If it was you, I'm so sorry.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
They were awesome people, though.
I bet if we talk about other stuff, that might come to you.
I pop up. Someone will go check the OP for me and save me from my memory.
So you were Queen at Battlemore. Tell me about what your favorite thing to do at Battlemore is. And was it at the current side, or was it far back enough that it was at a different site? Like, tell me about
a different site. It was at the original, the whatever that was called. Well, see, now my memory's just not working at all. It was at the old site, whatever that was called.
Okay.
And I don't remember when it moved after that. I think it was a couple of years after that it moved to the new site in Buena Vista. Say that correctly. So my favorite thing to do just in general at Battlemore, or my favorite thing to do as Queen?
Both. Let's hear both.
My favorite thing to do at Battlemore is nothing. I like to just sit around and be frivolous and have no responsibilities and hang out in my camp with my friends. I mean, isn't that what we all like to do? That's not what Walrick wants to do. He wants to, but I just like to sit around and visit and see people I haven't seen for a long time. And there are no like specific activities at Battlemore that I'm particularly more fond of than any other ones. Like I said, I don't fight, nor am I particularly engaged by fighting. So I don't go for the tournaments, and I don't want to watch melees, and sorry, you guys.
Well, and it's a very laid back event anyway. So
you take a few classes. I like teaching at Battlemore. I always try to do that a couple of times. But really, I just like wandering around and seeing what people are up to, seeing people's camps, visiting. That was not my favorite thing to do at Battlemore as Queen, because I didn't really get to do that so much. I think as Queen, as Queen, my favorite part was probably, it sounds weird to say it, but my favorite part was doing courts. And it's because we gave some really cool awards at Battlemore. We went to some fun vigils that I really enjoyed. We did a bunch of peerages at Battlemore, some on the field, some at courts.
Offers or elevations?
Both.
Cool.
Both. So we did, we offered a laurel to Mistress Liepa at Battlemore. And then we elevated a bunch of people. I'm trying to like picture the court in my mind, because that's the only way that I remember things, is if I have a visual that I can refer back to. So I think we elevated at the court, we elevated Mistress Alamanda. We elevated Sir Colgrim. Sir Einar was on the field. Gosh, who else did we do? It was so busy. And I sort of forget like what things happened in what order and where. I feel like there was other ones that we did. But those are the main ones I can think about right now. I know at Colgrim's vigil, His Majesty came and fought him as a troll. That was pretty cool. That was a fun time. I know there was there was 2 other vigils too, because I went to Alamanda's and then there was another one that was in the same area. I should have looked all this stuff up before we started. I'm sorry.
No, we probably went to 5 or 6 vigils at Estrella, and I can only think of really one. Like, if you ask me right now, I could only tell you one. But I know we went to a lot because that was like the thing, like, oh, getting dressed to go to vigils and, you know, doing the vigil circuit and all of that. But yeah. So I totally get it.
Well, the other really fun thing at Battlemore that was not related to my duties, it was a private householdy thing, that was the year that we did our first annual First Apprentice Showdown between my 2 apprentices, and that was super fun. We did that on the Sunday, kind of just in camp, and I had these 2 apprentices, and it happened. One of them lives in the East, and he had come to visit, and they each made a thing, and my Laurel happened to be there as well.
Oh, cool.
So then we picked the thing, and then whoever won happened to be Her Ladyship Bronwyn that year, or Her Excellency Bronwyn. She got to have the First Apprentice banner for the year. That was fun.
Like a lot of fun.
That was Zippy's idea. He also lost. And our theme was Star Wars, and he made me a smuggler's bench.
Oh.
It's like a collapsible bench, and it had a spot hollowed out on the underneath where you could hide a flask.
Yes. That sounds awesome.
And Bronwyn made like a little a chest that had a hidden drawer where you could put secret items.
Very cool.
It's a good time. Battlemore's a lot of work as Crown. It's a lot to do.
Yeah. Would you say it's more? Do you think it's more or less work than Estrella?
So the Crown is a lot more involved in Battlemore than the Crown is involved in Estrella, at least when I was Crown. That may have changed since then, but you know, when we were Crown in Atenvelt, Crowns were really expected to keep their noses out of Estrella, and we actually stepped on a few toes by not necessarily embracing that philosophy. So at Estrella, the work is, you know, you've got to figure out your courts, and you've got to figure out your attendance and your, you know, your gift exchange and your royalty feast and all that. But all of the infrastructure, the scheduling, all of that stuff, none of it has to do with the Crown, really, or it didn't at the time. And at Battlemore, that's not the case. You know, at Battlemore, they want your input on the schedule, and they want your input on lots of stuff. And we didn't really understand that because we'd gotten kind of scolded for being too nosy about Estrella. And so we came here and we're like, all right, Battlemore has autocrats. We don't need to do any of this stuff. And they're like, hey, we need stuff from you. And we were like, what?
Wait, what?
You need us to just, what? Okay. So I think Battlemore was more work for us, just because we were expected to be involved in more things than we were expected to be involved in for Estrella. You know, Estrella has a much bigger autocrat staff. It's been going a lot longer. It sort of runs by itself a little bit, sort of irregardless of what the Crown is up to. And Battlemore, they want you to participate a little bit more. The least work was Penzing.
Right.
No work at all.
Just show up and do your thing and
got some feasts.
Yeah.
Cool. We had extra feasts our year because a couple of kingdoms had decided they wanted to have royalty feasts. So we're like, all right, that's fine.
Sure, we can show up and eat your food.
My arm, my goodness. Yeah, Trimaris did one. It was great. We all just hung out and took our crowns off and got drunk. And
nice. We had a question come up that says, do you still sing in court? We love your voice. Mistress Magdalena?
Magdalene. Mistress Magdalene was actually our crown herald in Atenvelt. Super great old friend of mine. Well, Magdalene, both Walrick and I sung at our Stepping Up. He sang a song that his mother had written when she lived in the Outlands called Queen of Summer, I think it was called. And it was very surprising. He doesn't sing a lot. It was lovely. Apparently he made Arton cry, so that's a big deal.
Wow.
And then I sang something else. I didn't even sing. I don't know. Goonbolt helped me with it. And did we sing at our stepping down? I did. I sang Her Hymnus Smither, which is a 12th century Icelandic song. And I sang it, and we were re-singing away. And I had some people in my court who helped me sing with me. That was pretty fun. I enjoyed that a lot. I think that was the only times we sang in court. Oh, we did a rousing group rendition of the Outlands song that Mortigan and I wrote while waiting for court at Lily's, and we did that as a round at All Round Champions. We divided the crowd up into three. And the Outlands song is like, Outlands, Outlands, Outlands. I mean, it's not. But we had written like different parts to it, and so it was a long court, and so we like taught it to each section, and then we competed to see who could get the loudest group.
That's awesome.
I'd forgotten about that. That was hilarious.
So with your love of music, did you incorporate music a lot in your reign? Or I know I've had some friends that are like had the royal harper, and like this royal harper was always like around like harping when my friend was Princess of Sinagua, and I was like, oh, you can do that? And she's like, yeah, of course you can do that. And I'm like, oh, why don't I have a harper? That's cool.
Right? I'm a harper. I'm a lyre player because I'm fussy. I don't think we incorporated it a ton, and I think part of it is that my relationship with music in the essay is a little bit complicated in that I like fancy music. I sing with the New Mexico Symphony, and I'm trained and stuff, and that's the kind of music I like. It's what I want to sing, it's what I want to listen to. But I acknowledge that that's not what most people want to listen to. And when I first started, I'd been singing for years and years and years, leading up to joining the SCA. And in fact, that was sort of how I got started in the SCA, was someone was like, hey, you could come sing over here. And I was like, oh, could I? I'll make a weird joke so I can sing early music. And actually, that's from back when I met Magdalene. She was one of the people I knew when I very first started. And I had some early experiences trying to do sort of the fancier, more classical music, and not getting a great response to it, both as an individual singer and in a group I sang with. And it wasn't that people were mean or anything. They just didn't care about it. People like Bardic, they want to listen to folk songs and folks, and they want to sing around a fire and stuff. And we don't necessarily have a great culture in either Atenveld or this kingdom, I don't think, for kind of the fancier music. And that's fine. We don't need to. But that's what I want to do. And so I think as Crown, I wanted to do some of that music, but I didn't necessarily expect that everyone was going to really be excited about listening to me sing John Dowland, or Thomas Campion or whatever. And at the time, I wasn't real excited about being flexible. I didn't want to sing folk music when I was 26 or 27. I wanted to sing what I wanted to sing, and so I just did it somewhere else instead. And that was fine. And so I think as Crown, I had in the back of my mind this idea of, and it was an incorrect idea, but this idea of, oh God, we're going to stop court to sing again. Like, I didn't want to do that. And I think I was perhaps a little bit too preoccupied with not wanting to bog down long courts with music. Although we had a great bard who did some, Sir Valora, I think was our Bard of the Sun. And she absolutely came and did some singing, when courts were running late or in between things. I don't know that I necessarily did that in the Outlands a lot. And it was just because I always knew that our courts were going to be a little bit long, and I didn't want to make them longer.
Yeah.
And maybe that was shortchanging people. Maybe people would have really liked it. We do the stag choir, and we do music here during courts. And so that was probably more about my own hangups and insecurities about the value of the kind of music I like to others than it was about whether the kingdom would have actually enjoyed it or whether we had people who would have rocked it. We have some fantastic bards in this kingdom, and I probably could have done a better job of highlighting them.
Well, but it's that hard balance though of like, I don't want court to be forever. I know, like, that's So we start all of our courts with a children's story, and it's like when we visit to the same places, they're like, "Are we doing that again?" I'm like, "Yes, we're doing that for every court." And they're like, "That's going to make court long." And I'm like, "Sorry, it's really important to me that the children are engaged and we have something that." And like, I'm sorry if the adults have to sit there and be bored for 5 minutes. Guess what? Your child has to sit there and be bored for an hour and a half. So,
yes, absolutely.
And it's something a little different to kind of break it up. So I kind of feel like, it's not the same old thing. It's not something we do all the time. And you know what? For 6 months, you get to hear a children's story at the start of every court.
Yeah.
So I was not as nice as you were. I was like, whatever, I'm just going to make court 10 minutes longer because I think it's important. And so, yeah, I'm always advised, like, you realize that's going to make court longer. And I'm like, yes, it is.
Well, I knew we had long courts anyway. And I think, we were very interested in courts running smoothly and being, having good pacing,
Mm-hmm.
And having sort of a theatrical arc to them. We both have theater backgrounds, and that sort of staging and pacing is kind of makes a big difference, when you kind of think it through. And I think part of my concern was always, do I want to stop the forward momentum? Mm-hmm. And so, we would maybe have a little bit of singing at the beginning or a little bit at the end. I know at the end of our very first court, we had everyone do, there's a round that we sing here locally, that's Sumerista Kuminin. And we always sing it with Gunvald. And it's a great song, and it was a summer rain, and so it made sense. And so what I did is I got that music to a bunch of people up north, and this was before we had the stag choir. Mm-hmm. But there had been a class at a collegium. I think it was a tribaronial collegium that I'd come to as princess, and they did a class on period music, and I was like, "Hey, I'm going to come to your class. Do you think we could learn this song so that you can all sing it with me at coronation?" And I'll tell you what, we had the music available to people. We separated, one side and the other, and we all did a big round of Sumerista Kuminin, and that was great. I got good feedback on that. People liked the singing occasionally. I didn't want to wear out my welcome, I guess.
Yeah.
Next time.
Next time.
There's no next time.
That was going to be one of my questions. So would you want to reign again, or do you feel like you guys are kind of done? Your kids are a little bit older, so does that kind of factor in? How does that work?
That's a more complicated question, because it's not just about whether we want to. It's about whether it's logistically feasible anymore. I think I really enjoyed being queen. I mean, it was a ton of work, and it's not necessarily work that I'm intuitive about. I'm not instinctively good at being organized. And I'm sure many people who know me will laugh right now because I'm incredibly disorganized. I'm super forgetful, as we've already seen several times. And, being sort of the behind the scenes executive function part of Crown was very difficult for me to manage with any reliability. But other parts of it I really did enjoy. And I enjoyed being able to make those special experiences for people. And that's hard to give up. It's hard not to think to yourself, oh God, I wish I could participate in this peerage in a different way, or I wish I could make this gift for this person, or, I wish I could change this law or change this, this part of culture or something. I mean, it's hard not to sort of think back and then think forward and, what if I could do that? And, so I think sometimes that I would really enjoy doing it again. I don't know that Walrick would. He found it very stressful. I think because he was so invested in putting on a good show, he actually developed like a thing where he would throw up before courts, which he didn't do the first reign. It was just this time, which I thought was really weird. And I don't know that he's going to appreciate me sharing that. But he would get really nervous about it, and that stressed him out. But then I think too, he works so much, and he had wrist surgery in March, and we don't yet know what the long-term implications of that are going to be. It's currently not great, and it's been a while, but without him being able to actually fight consistently, there's no way of knowing how significant of an impact that's going to, because it was his right wrist.
Okay.
So
yeah.
So that it may be a moot point.
Right.
But I mean, in the last 6 years, we've thought about it, and he doesn't have time. You got to be a grown up first, and he has a very demanding job that requires a lot of hours and a lot of traveling, and I think the kids would be fine now. They could go manage themselves, and that part of it would be a lot easier.
Yeah.
If they did want to be with us, they could be engaged in something helpful.
Yeah.
And they were not. Like a 3-year-old cannot help you.
No.
Anything.
Yeah. That's been honestly, like, we had somebody like, okay, you're not the babysitter, but if there's an issue, can you be the point of contact? Kind of to the point where I can look at you and say, do we know where my kid is?
Yeah.
Kind of thing. It does make a huge difference when they can self-manage. I mean, it is huge.
Yeah. We just tried not to bring them to stuff if we could. And we had someone, Mistress Caradwin, who was willing to skip events so that she could stay here and watch them for a weekend. Yeah. And there were a few times, because she's a school librarian. Mm-hmm. And so there were a few times where she would take an afternoon off. She'd take a Friday off for us so that we could travel. And she would just stay at the house, and she'd do art projects with them. And that was cool. Or she'd come to the event, and that would be all she did the whole time, was just babysit them. And it was, gosh, I was so grateful to her. I mean, what a gift. Yeah. The first time it was my in-laws. Yeah. Who watched them, and our household and their household. And, we had people who were more than happy to take care. But it's also easier to take care of a 1-year-old because they're not as mobile as a 6 and a 3-year-old, or 7 and 4. I can't remember. Yeah.
So do you think they remember being princesses? And did you guys do the Princess Royale for them?
We did. In fact, we used His Majesty's little cornets. He let us borrow them, which was really great. And they did wear them briefly. So technically we did it, but I don't know. We just tried to keep them home as much as possible because they were irritating, and we were busy. And that's a terrible thing to say, but it's true. And it's probably true for most parents. Maybe some parents are better able to manage multiple inputs. I'm very easily distracted, and it's difficult for me to stay focused on things if I've got other things in the background. And, you've got to deal with your kid. It's not
right. And that's a natural thing. Like, yeah, your kids are always going to be your number one priority. And that's just the fact. So it can be distracting. So there's another question that came up. Is there a tradition from Aidenvelt that you miss and wish you could bring to the Outlands? And that came from Lord Cal.
You guys know I haven't lived in Aidenvelt for a super long time, right? That's a tough one. I'm not going to be popular for saying this because this is a really important Outlands tradition, but in Aidenvelt, the king crowns himself. Yeah. And I think you like what you grew up with, and that's a very like Conan approach, right? Like, I'm going to crown myself. I want it. They crown the queen. They, the Duke or the Count crowns himself, and the Lady of the Rose. And, obviously that wasn't a tradition that really impacted me particularly because I wasn't the king. I wasn't crowning myself for any point of this. But I know that was something that Walrick balked at a little bit. And, it's not that one's better than the other. I think it's just what you see the most to begin with. And, we spent, I don't know how 15 years in Aidenvelt. He spent even longer. He'd been, he started playing when he was 7. So, and he was mostly in Aidenvelt. So it's just, that's what you see. I think the other thing that I really, that I miss from Aidenvelt is the size of the crown tournaments there. Mm-hmm. I talked about this a little bit last week with Roland, that, that's just not our culture here. Our culture is don't fight unless you're going to win. And so you tend to have slightly smaller lists. And then, and I don't know if it's related to the size of the list or if it's just because of the amount of traveling it involves, going to crowns. We tend to have the events themselves tend to be smaller. I think in Aidenvelt, the farthest you're ever going to drive is like 6 hours, and you're unlikely to drive that far. Normally it's going to be maybe 2 hours to crown. Like, it's not a huge investment of time. You can day trip crown, and so you do. Everyone goes to, crown is a huge deal, and everyone goes, and you have 30 or 40 fighters typically. And, there's loads of people who fight in that tournament who aren't going to win, and they know it. And it's okay because they know it. I think people who know they can win and don't want to, maybe don't fight. But the emphasis is different. And I absolutely understand why the culture is what it is here. And I'm not knocking it. I'm not saying that that idea of not fighting if you're not ready to do the job. I think that's important because it's a big job and it is a big responsibility and a big financial burden and a time burden and whatever. But I don't know. I miss those huge crown tournaments, where there's, 20 tents on the Eric and everyone has 17 banners flying and big processions. And there's that level of noise, that just makes you feel it's more immersive, I guess.
Is their crown tourney a 2-day event out there?
Yeah. And as I recall, typically the second day is for Warlord and Rapier Champion. And then coronations. And that's another thing too, is, we were sort of used to these big, long, full day coronations. And then the second day was when you had your champion tournaments. And again, in 8 and belt, you can day trip both days if you need to. And so the travel requirements are substantially less there. And so I understand why that's not reasonable in a kingdom like the Outlands. I do, but I still miss it. I miss being able to give 3 hours to a closing court, when you can give all of your thank yous, the amount of time that you need to make them feel special. You can give your Lion of 8 and belt, you can give your, commander awards or your whatever, your big awards that you've saved for coronation. There's time for that. There's time for a lot of spectacle and a lot of theatricality, which I really enjoy at an event like that. And I think, when you only have an hour and a half for your closing court, you can't do that. You don't have, because there are certain things that have to happen.
Right.
And as a result, other awards that are, I think, like super special that you really want to showcase and highlight, you don't have time to do those. You have to do them at another event. And it's not that that's bad. It's just different. And when you're used to, a certain way of doing things and you come to another kingdom and you're like, oh, that's, I miss my long coronations and I miss my giant crown tournaments.
So you briefly mentioned that your husband started in 8 and belt at 7 years old. So he's 2nd gen and your girls are 3rd gen. Yeah.
Yep. And my husband's parents both play quite actively. His mother is a Laurel. His father is a Knight and a Pelican. They've been playing for, well, how old is he? I don't want to do that math. 26 years?
Yeah.
Probably 30 at this point. Yeah, so he was little, and they started here. I think they started in Citadel with Countess Monica. She was the Baroness then. And so, my sister-in-law, when she doesn't play anymore, but when she did, her name was Monica not Monica, it was, I forget what the first name was, but she used Von Zell as her last name because of Monica Von Zell. And then they moved to, I think they played in Ontier a little bit, and then they were in 8 and belt for most of that. And so he started little. And he just loved it. And so he was fighting buffers as soon as he was old enough. He was on the field at Estrella as soon as he was old enough. He might have been actually old enough because his father, I know a lot of these 2nd gen fighters, they sneak on the field early. I don't know that my father-in-law would have let him do that. I can't remember the details of that. And then he also played in a different group as well. So he was like going back and forth between 2 different medieval clubs when he was in high school and early college. So he liked his fighting.
So do you think that affects your outlook or how you deal with the children at all?
Yes. So, Walrick was a kid at an age where you had free range kids. That was typical. And you just have a gang of them roaming around Estrella with nobody really watching them. And it was safe to do so. You didn't have to worry about someone getting nabbed or something happening to them. I mean, I'm sure that there were still dangers, but it wasn't as likely. I mean, I don't know that it's still likely that your kids are going to have something happen to them, but I think, we in the 80s, we had this culture of thinking that kids were going to be safe. I used to ride my bike to the 7-Eleven by myself all the time and nobody cared. I wouldn't let my girls do that now.
Right.
And so he maybe remembers those more flexible times and would have allowed our girls a little bit more freedom because of it. I didn't. Those were not my experiences. So, yeah. I like to know where my girls were. And so they were either with me, and still, they're either with me or they're with a responsible party. Now, my eldest is 13 now, and my youngest is 10. And so now, if we're at the park that we have events at, I'm familiar enough with that environment and where the streets are and where the random non-SA people are going to show up, so I let them wander around and I just look for them from time to time. And if I can't find them, then I ask our group of friends, hey, have you seen Sophia? And they're like, yeah, she's in that tree. And I'm like, okay, cool. That's fine. But yeah, I'm not as flexible with my children as Walrick's parents were with him, but it's a different time. So, that's certainly not a criticism of them. He was peed on some electric fences, but
yeah, it's a very different time. I know my son asks about going to Penzic all the time. And I was like, you can go to Penzic when you can sign yourself in. And he said, oh, how old do you have to be to do that? And I said, 18, but you'll enjoy it more if you're 21.
Yeah. Well, and I just don't take my kids to a lot of bigger things. I don't think I've camped with the pair of them since we were Crown. There's one event where we camped with them and it sucked. Because there were cannons and they kept waking up and like freaking, because Sophia has some sensory processing issues, and so she gets really freaked out by loud noises.
Oh yeah.
And so yeah, every time those cannons went off, she's just like, ah! She's crying. I'm like, I have court tomorrow. Stop it. She's over here glaring at me.
That's okay. I was glaring at my son. His friend kept knocking on the door and ringing the doorbell. And I'm like, enter the door. So that was what my dirty look was earlier. Was my kid, like,
Sophia just yelled to me that I had awakened the ancient one with her name. What does that mean?
Yeah.
You're 10. She's not the ancient one. Go away.
Yeah.
That's why I don't bring them.
Oh no.
Doing dishes. Dad asked me to do the dishes.
I think we have a last connection, maybe. It's looking like. So I think we'll just maybe wait a minute or so and see if she can log back in. I'm not sure how I'm supposed to entertain you. Do some cool new stuff. I learned acid etching last week. That was cool. What else? Oh, I've been crocheting, which I know is not period, but it's still pretty neat. Oh, tell us a story. Okay. I will tell you the story of, I'm not a good storyteller. I'm not a good bard. Oh dear. Okay, good. Yay, Saved by the Bell, I think. Hopefully. Yay!
It's not.
Are you there?
I am.
Yay, okay.
Can you hear me? Yay, okay.
Okay. Oh no, I got a thing.
Well, as Sophia said, we awakened the ancient one and it killed my internet connection. That's what happened. It was Sophia. It was her wrath for talking about her.
We were trying to watch the Trans-Siberian Orchestra live stream last night, and we had it did not go well. I'm not sure if it was like us streaming or a billion people trying to watch it.
Streaming.
But every time Adam walked out of the room, it would crash. And we're like, you are not allowed to leave the room. You stay right here. You're either like a conduit for internet connection, or I'm not sure what.
Like resonance. Who knows?
Yeah. Or like, don't move from this spot. So,
what she's doing.
Your best no shit there I was queen story in the last 5 minutes that we have.
Crap. Oh, that's horrible. I told you my loot story and my first apprentice showdown story.
So how does it work having apprentices when you're a queen? I guess that's a good question.
Well, one of them lived in the East.
Okay.
And one of them was my head cook. So I just made her work.
Okay.
Our squire got a girlfriend right at the beginning, and so he wasn't around much, so we couldn't use him as... Okay, here's a good one. This is not from the Outlands. This is my favorite story. And it's not about me. It's about Walrick, and he's going to be super grumpy that I'm telling this story, which is why I'm telling it, because it's going to be hilarious. So when we were crowning Atenvelt, he really wanted to command, and he just didn't think that anyone was ever going to let him. And he's now done it a couple of times in the Outlands, and so he got it out of his system, but he really wanted to command. And so he's like, I'm going to command my own. It's like, don't do that. That's stupid. And he's like, I'm going to do it. And so he did. And the first day, he ran around and he yelled. He got super hoarse, and I ended up having to do all of Grand Court because he couldn't talk, which was great. And he had a little chafing problem after the first day. And he's like super upset about it because he's like, I'm not going to be able to fight tomorrow. I'm really uncomfortable. This is terrible. Everything's terrible. Because he wants so badly to do a good job and to live up to everyone's expectations. And he puts a lot of pressure on himself. So he's really upset. And we're in our tent. And I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, put some lotion on it or something. I don't know. We solved it. It was fine. But the good part of this story is that we hear this rustling outside. And all of a sudden, it's the Whiskey Bards. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
I am. I've seen them at Penn.
They're good friends of ours. And so they're outside our camp, and they start to sing this song about having an enormous penis. So they're serenading us. And we find out later, and of course, it lifted the mood, and it was fine, and we got some baby ointment, and everything worked out brilliantly. But that was the funniest thing. And what we found out later is that Walrick's squire, Lord Crispin, who doesn't play a lot anymore, he's in the army. He's been Walrick's best friend for years and years and years and years, and we miss him terribly. He knew that Walrick was upset. He went and found those guys and had them come and serenade us so that Walrick would feel better.
That's awesome.
He's in Virginia now, I think.
That's cool. Yeah, I only have one student, and she's not my apprentice. She's like my white scarf equivalent student. So she's like, I was working with her on becoming a grant level. So I wasn't sure like how that works really. Like,
yeah, it depends on the crown. You know, I think our first rank, I think Walrick only had one squire. I think it was Crispin, and he did so much stuff for us. He helped set stuff up. He tore stuff down. I mean, he did. And he was just tremendously helpful. Like I said, this reign, our squire, I say. This squire, just had personal stuff going on, so he wasn't around as much. I mean, which happens. And then Bronwyn, I didn't have any students. Did I? I guess maybe Zippy was already my student when we were crowned. I can't remember now. I think he must have been. And I'm sure I just made him do stuff.
Yeah.
You can't, I don't know if you've ever met Sir Zipser. Sir Zippy, he's in the East now. No, not Outlands, or sorry, not His Highness Zipser.
Not Outlands Zipster, you say?
Sir Zippy. Who was an Atenvelt. Outlands Zipser. Sorry, Atenvelt. Who's ours first? No, Sir Zippy, he lives out in the East now, and he is fantastic, super great friend. And I'm sure I just made him do things, but for any of you out there who know Zippy, everyone knows Zippy. Like, I can't believe how many people I've connected with because I know Zippy, and they're just like, oh, you know Zippy, we're going to be best friends now. And I'm like, oh, that's fine. He's a wide circle of gravity. But you can't make him do anything. So I'm sure he was just generous and helpful in some way. I can't remember specifically. And then, yeah, Bronwyn cooked for us. So
awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We're at the hour mark. So I just want to let you know how much I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing with
My
us your time as Outlands Queen and some of Edenville Queen.
Thank
So
you.
thank you so much. So join us in 2 weeks for our next installment of Outlands RoyalTea, where His Majesty will interview a Duke of the Outlands.
Of some sort. Oh, that guy.
Garden.
I met that guy once.
Yeah, so
Nice.
log on and check us out and have a great day, Outlands. Bye-bye.
Bye.